Alright guys, so this is my what I do for work video, and to create this video, which has been so requested from so many of you guys, I thought that it would be great to start from the very beginning. So basically, I have always wanted to be a writer and write books, and I loved doing art when I was younger and little, and I wanted to be an artist or a writer. So I actually had like my first writing opportunity. When I was 15 years old, I was published in this book called Celebrate Young Poets Speak Out, which is a collection of poems and short stories from all over the nation, basically. And so my first published piece was actually in this book, and I wrote a poem about my grandma who had just passed at the time, and I received $75 for it. So my first published piece ever was over a poem that I poured my heart out about my grandma and my experience losing my grandma. It was called Already There. One of my teachers was like, you know, you're really talented, you should try to get some of your work published. And I was like, I don't know, like, do you really think I could? So I'm so glad that I did, because I was actually in a couple of these anthologies over my high school career, and it kind of kick-started my writing career as a professional, because I was getting paid for these things. So that's kind of where I had my start. My senior project was a self-published, self-illustrated book called Secrets of a Healing Heart. That was also about my grandma and the loss that I had losing her in high school. I went into college. I went to California Baptist University, go Lancers. I got involved with the newspaper and the yearbook right away. I was, of course, on the yearbook committee at my high school, so it was an awesome segue into my university's yearbook. And of course, I loved writing, so it kind of just flowed really nicely. My professor at the time, Miriam Pearson, she really took me under her wing and got me plugged in to my university's yearbook and newspaper. And so actually, a few weeks into my college career, October 12th, 2007, I had my first front page article that I wrote for the Banner newspaper as a freshman. Basically, I had to interview Pastor Rick Warren. He's probably one of the most famous pastors in the entire world, and he happened to be an alumni of CBU. So he came on campus, and the first stop was an interview with me, this freshman who was just absolutely shaking in her boots. I had my Wet Seal business black slacks on, and then Gwen Stefani had a Harajuku line at the time that was literally called like Harajuku, and so I had my Gwen Stefani sweater on. It had a big Harajuku girl in the back, and it was red, and it was like a sweater that had little cap sleeves like this. And I was walking to the interview, and I knew the vice president of our entire university was going to be there too. I knew that there was going to be a lot of eyes on me, and I walk into this room, and it's like a studio set, because I ended up doing an off-camera interview with him, and I was so just shaking in my boots. I was so nervous, and like the moment that Rick Warren came in for my interview, he just gave me a big hug, asked what my name was. I said, my name's Brianna, and he's like, Brianna, that's a beautiful name. It's a beautiful name. And I just started asking him questions, and it was my first time ever doing anything like it. And I will never forget the adrenaline rush in that moment of just feeling so accomplished after leaving that interview. And Pastor Rick Warren asked me, so what do you want to do? And at the time I just went to Africa a few months before. I was sort of thinking, okay, should I be a missionary or should I be a journalist? Like, what should I do? Of course, I was 18 years old. This was only a few weeks into college. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I either want to be a missionary or a journalist. And he's like, do both. And I was like, yeah, definitely. And he's like, well, you definitely have a talent for this. And I just remember leaving that interview with him just so confident. I was on like the top of the world. I felt just so empowered in my first few weeks of college. I remember that next weekend, because of course it's a newspaper, it has to be timely. We went to Palm Springs with our friends, and I was in an office the entire day basically typing up my first story, which ended up being on the front page of the newspaper and later submitted for an award. And I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to go over everything. I wanted to talk about everything, and I've not really had the chance to do that. And I feel like a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so accomplished. But I'm like, yo. I started somewhere. We all started somewhere. And from this very young age, I started believing in myself right away. And being a part of the Banner newspaper, we had the editor-in-chief of of the Press Enterprise newspaper come in, and he was talking to the entire class, and he was like, you know, maybe someday you guys could be working for the newspaper. And I remember thinking, while I was watching him talk, I was like, I'm going to write for the Press Enterprise newspaper someday. I made that dream happen within a year. I saw that they weren't covering mixed martial arts. In the Inland Empire, which is where I went to college, every single person walking around had an MMA shirt on, had a UFC shirt on. Everyone was training. It was really becoming such a huge sport in our community, and it wasn't being covered in a newspaper. And so what I did is I really dove into the sport. I taught myself the sport. I would walk into local gyms. I would interview the coaches, the trainers, the fighters, and, you know, really try to dive into that world so that I could write about it. A few months after doing that, started writing for the Press Enterprise newspaper in 2009. Here is the Press Enterprise newspaper, January 13th, 2010. So we're just gonna go to the sports section. This is one of my first ever articles right here. And it says, local fighter gets his shot at Spotlight. MMA Karakanian, who is 12-1-1 as a pro, will join Bellator series to fight at 145 pounds. I remember just being absolutely thrilled to see my work in the newspaper. And I always loved just like the feeling of like the substantialness of a newspaper or a magazine in my hands. And I was just like, you know what? I wanna do this someday. Like, I want to be a writer. I'm gonna be a writer. And so I would start covering all of the fights locally, and then it became regionally. And I kind of jumped right into another sport called Muay Thai. And I was one of the first female reporters on the West Coast to cover Muay Thai, which is a different type of martial arts than mixed martial arts. And so at these fights, I would go and cover it for the Press Enterprise newspaper, but then of course I'd be linked with the amazing magazine editors who I wanted to be someday. I was the only girl usually covering the sport at the time, especially for Muay Thai. It was pretty typical. And so I basically would go out to the fights in Las Vegas at the casinos, and I was only maybe 19, 20 at the time, so I wasn't really even legally allowed in the casinos, and I was only denied one time from not going to a fight. But I would sit ringside and cage side. I would like get splashed with the sweat, with the blood, like with everything. And like now that, you know, now that would just like absolutely be a no-no for me. I would cover the sport and I would report on it and analyze it, and of course mingle with my colleagues who were also reporting on the same thing. I would always dress the part, and that's like one thing that like the commissioners would always tell me. They're like, you know, ever since you came onto the scene, everyone has been dressing more. Like, you wouldn't go to an MMA fight and see people in suits. You wouldn't see the press in the press section, the guys in suits. Like, they would be in like, you know, an MMA shirt or just, you know, just casual. And I would always dress up to the nines. Like, I was depending on this job. Like, I was depending on this fight. And I had, you know, my express professional clothes on, and I just took so much pride in being cage side and ringside for so many years. And I took so much pride in what I did. And I eventually ended up working with Muay Times magazine. I would go out to Las Vegas, and this was basically my first magazine that I worked for. It's called Muay Times magazine. It's all about Muay Thai, and these fighters were all over the world. And basically when they came into town, like, I would be one of the people who would interview them, and I would go to their training camps and basically just really dive into the sport. And that's how my writing career began. We went from the banner newspaper at my university to, during university, also writing for the Press Enterprise newspaper. And I remember how awesome that was to be able to kind of bring in to my university as well. You know, that one of their writers with the banner newspaper was also a writer for the Press Enterprise newspaper. So I basically was working full-time through college, and I had my eyes on the prize. While, you know, people were out and about and having like more of a social life, I was focused on writing. I would say I was more focused on writing than I was actual school. That's kind of been a theme of mine anyways. I really truly follow my passions, and university wasn't anything different. My passions led me to exactly where I wanted to be, which brings us to our next chapter of the magazine world. Okay, so now we are in my home office, and I am picking up right where we left off. So basically, from covering all of the fights, and going ringside and cage side and meeting all of the editors. I did meet my favorite magazine editor-in-chief at the time, Doug Jeffrey. He was the editor-in-chief of Ultimate MMA magazine. It used to be Ultimate Grappling magazine. It was the longest running MMA publication at the time and very prestigious. And I was like, I need to work with him. And so that summer in 2009, I called them for an internship, and I ended up getting the internship and working the internship in the fall semester. I had a lot of hands-on experience with just the publishing industry, learning how to work the servers and learning how to create more of a magazine article. Fast forward a few years later, I obviously graduated from college and I ended up getting a job with the publisher, which was Beckett Media at the time. So I became managing editor of Ultimate MMA, my dream magazine, in 2012. At Beckett Media and in the MMA industry just in general, I definitely took my journalism career as far as I could, and I was nominated for the MMA Reporter of the Year in 2014. I ended up beating out my competition, which worked at Fox Sports. We had a couple of people who worked at MMA Junkie that I was up against. I was up against some really big heavy hitters, and I was really shocked to get this award that was voted on by the public. And I had gone to the UFC fights. It was becoming more mainstream. I was definitely one of the first people to really blow up the women's side of the sport. And I believed wholeheartedly that women belonged in the sport, especially in the UFC. I was in love with Strikeforce, and so seeing women fight at Strikeforce, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. I knew that it was going to be happening for UFC too. So actually at UFC, I believe 7, we had Ronda Rousey and Liz Carmouche in the first ever female bout for the UFC, and I got to cover that cage side for MMA Hawaii magazine. This is like my favorite cover of all time. It has Ronda Rousey on the cover. We featured the top females in the sport in this issue. And here I am writing my editor's letter. I said, here to say, women's MMA has come a long way since December 2000. And then I talked about the first bout ever. Oh my gosh, it gives me chills to talk about. And so I said here, having a female match on a fight card would be the equivalent to a sideshow. It was rare and misunderstood. I wrote this back in 2013, and here we are today, and women's MMA is just absolutely thriving. And so I definitely wanted to share that with you guys, because I then segued into a new industry after I felt that my career in MMA journalism had gone to as far as I could take it at the time. So I was actually on the cover of BFM magazine for my career in MMA journalism, and I was basically named MMA's most influential woman, and this was back in 2013. This was quite the year for women's MMA, not only in the cage but in journalism. And my dear friend Stephanie Joplin actually wrote the article, which was also amazing because she was also a female journalist, and I remember feeling so bossy in this photo shoot. So yeah, this is in John's office because he needs to be reminded who he's with. So after I got my job at Beckett Media, I thought, okay, awesome, I'm gonna be a part of Ultimate MMA magazine. Well, I was a part of Ultimate MMA magazine and about, I want to say, 100 others throughout the course of my career. And so I was the managing editor of Bow and Arrow Hunting magazine, Gun World magazine, World of Firepower magazine, Action Pursuit Games magazine, which is a paintball magazine, Concealed Carry Handguns magazine. I wrote for a ton of magazines like Grilled and Go Gluten Free. I was the managing editor of Where Jesus Walked magazine. This was my baby. This was my heart. This is my heart and soul. And this was the magazine that I just loved so much. I was really sad when it left, and slowly magazines started leaving one by one. And it started with Ultimate MMA magazine. I really dove into the firearms industry and men's interest publications, and so I really dove into World of Firepower magazine and put so much of my interest in this magazine and a couple of others like it. And so this is actually one of my favorite covers of all time. It has the Reaper 33 on it, and it's an AR that if I got a gun in the entire world, any gun, it'd be this one. It has an amazing story behind it of the owner who who was in special forces and that kind of stuff. And those kind of stories absolutely intrigues me. And so now, instead of being a woman in a male-dominated industry like MMA, I was a woman in a male-dominated industry like firearms. And so of course, men would read my pieces my entire life with a magnifying glass. Like, what's she gonna write? Men would be like reading my stuff to make sure that I was 100% accurate, basically. So now, instead of critiquing how I would critique a fight, it would be critiquing if I got anything wrong about a gun, the ballistics, anything, any kind of detail. And so being a part of this publication allowed me to go to the SHOT Show, which is like the biggest gun show in the industry. So to actually get exclusive access to shoot guns that have never been shot before the public got a hold of it. And I got to review different guns, and it was just absolutely thrilling to be a part of, and really, you know, helped kind of replace my love for MMA. I was so bummed out, but I was still writing for MMA Hawaii magazine, but I was still so sad that this was gone. I felt like I could do so much more, really, truly. So I did, and I started 2 new publications. So we did New Hair Trends magazine, which was a seasonal publication, and then we did Everyday Hair Extensions magazine, and this was actually one of Kylie Jenner's first ever covers. It was awesome because we got to work with Bellamy, who did the extension line for her. And again, you guys, this entire publication was from scratch. I had no contacts, and we were able to create a beautiful 132-page magazine out of it. We did the exact same thing with New Hair Trends, and I was one of the first ever editors to use influencers as my experts. So instead of going to, you know, expert sources, now I'm going to the influencers, right? So I was actually so many influencers' first ever interview and published work. So I was Guy Tang's first ever interview, and this was the first magazine that he was ever published in, and to this day, he will tell you the same. This is the shoot that we did with one of my really good friends, Desiree. And so we made it happen. We partnered with amazing brands. We created beautiful hair, all from scratch. And I had so much fun because for me, beauty was natural. I no longer felt like I had to impress anybody with the way that I was writing. I no longer felt like I had to triple and quadruple check my work, because what I was writing when it came to beauty was straight from knowledge. So I would use every single friend that I had to do a hairstyle in our book. Here is that Guy Tang, infamous Guy Tang article. This was his first article ever, and I was able to write it and be the editor of this magazine at the same time. Guy Tang is the biggest name in hair in the entire industry now on social media. It was a lot of work having to put this together from scratch, but I figured out a way to do it. That scrappiness has so translated into like what I do today. And so Lala, who is one of my best friends, this was her first published piece too. I hired a photographer in the Sacramento area, even though I was in Orange County. I got really scrappy, like I said, and they did this beautiful photo shoot with her, and she had this gorgeous 6-page spread. This is when Lala was probably at about 50,000 followers on Instagram. And so I would find these influencers super young and I would publish them. I ended up really developing a beautiful relationship with them, and this is the start of how I got to where I am now. Consumer publications were slowing down. You know, more and more publishers were making cuts, and I ended up going and working at a trade publication. It was called Beauty Store Business Magazine. It was a 25-year publication, and I was coming into this with very much fresh eyes and a fresh attitude, and I was so excited and just like so eager to switch things up. And so we basically revamped the publication, and I continued on my path of treating the influencers like the experts. And so while I was at Beauty Store Business Magazine, I was able to put the leaders of our industry today on the cover of the publications, and I made amazing relationships with these brands. So this is Linda and Chris Twill. They are the owners of Morphe brushes and my good friends. I absolutely love them. And so this is Kat Von D, and I had Kat on our cover in February 2017. She's absolutely an amazing interview. One of the best to date, actually. And these are the owners of Bellamy, and I had them on the cover too. They were super, super relevant, doing so many collabs, one of the first brands to ever do collabs. And so it was an honor to be able to put them on the publication as well. This is Larissa Love. Larissa is actually one of the influencers who I work with to this day, and we had an amazing publication with her on the cover. Larissa is an absolute boss. Look at that vintage Chanel she's wearing, you guys. She's a girl after my own heart. I love her. We had Anastasia Beverly Hills, Anastasia, on our cover. My most epic cover to date was my issue with Manny MUA, Jeffree Star, and Patrick Star. And this is one of the most iconic covers in the beauty industry, having 3 men in makeup on one of the oldest beauty publications in our industry. So this definitely shook our publisher to her core, and I gave her a mini heart attack until the social media numbers translated into 9 million impressions in the first 3 weeks of this publication. And what I really loved doing with this publication was catching on to trends and catching on to popular influencers or brands at the time. I mean, look at this is Morphe back in, hold on, this is Morphe brushes back in 2016, February 2016. And now look at Morphe to this day. Insane how far they have come. And so I loved being able to work with these influencers to really create beautiful stories. This is a magazine that is absolutely iconic. The fact that I was able to make this happen is probably one of the biggest career highlights to date. And of course, the storyline is very different with each and every single one of them now, but this has just always been like such a special place in my heart with these 3 guys. I loved being able to also do the cover letter for this. So that's my cover letter. So those are just a couple of examples of what I did in the beauty industry, and I felt like, you know what, I was doing a lot for my publication, and I actually taught myself how to do video editing. I taught myself in 24 hours because I was really, truly, and still am a backpack journalist, where you have to take your own pictures, you have to write your own stories, you have to edit your own work, and the next step was you have to edit your own videos. And so I would edit my own videos, I would publish them onto YouTube, and I did this back in the day, back when I was doing mixed martial arts reporting. And so the fact that I was doing that for my publication, I was like, okay, you know what, I have a talent for this. I have a talent for social media. And so I actually started doing social media on the side for a few brands. And one day I walked into Harlan Kirshner's office. He's the CEO of the Kirshner Group, and he is like the godfather in our industry. He's the guy who puts products on shelves. You guys go into a store and you see like a big sexy product or like a Hot Tools product or something. That is because of Harlan Kirshner's company. And he is kind of like a celebrity in our industry. He really is. And he basically took me under his wing, and I said, hey, I have a couple of job offers right now, working with a few brands, and I'm gonna put in my 2 weeks notice today to the publication, because I saw that publishing was really starting to dwindle away, and I was like, I need to get digital before there's just nothing left. And he said that he had interviewed dozens of people, and I was the first person who ever explained social media in a way that he understood it. And from that point on, he said, okay, so here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna come and work with me, and I'd love for you to build out a digital division of my company. So that's what I did. I started doing social media and influencer relations for the Kirshner Group. And I had a lot of my friends who were influencers who were needing help with business deals. And so I would, because I'm a writer and an editor, I would go over the contracts and I would help them with their business deals. And it just kind of was a natural segue into, hey, can I manage you? Or hey, do you want to manage me? So when influencers started asking me if I wanted to manage them, I said, okay, great. So again, another thing that I picked up from scratch was truly managing influencers and finding out what that means, what are the ins and outs, and kind of just developing this career, this hybrid career of having a social media agency and also managing influencers. And by, I think, my first few months, I had about 10 influencers on my roster. And one of my biggest influencers to date, who's still with me, is my dear friend Manal at Manal, and she is the founder of Wake Up and Makeup, and Wake Up and Makeup has 11.6 million followers. And from that point on, it has just been a word of mouth for my ability to manage influencers, and we have taken on some amazing people on our roster. It's really truly been such a passion of mine to be able to grow the business, the side of things, for so many of these amazing influencers that so many people are just absolutely in love with. So in 2019, I couldn't breathe. So in 2019, the beginning of 2019, and really before that, I was feeling pressure from people who wanted to work with me, who wanted just solely my product. And I worked my butt off. That translated into social media, that translated into sales, translated into relationships. And I really wanted to create this place, this creative agency. And so in 2019, I started Editora Media. And Editora Media, whew, is my baby, So in 2019, I created Editora Media. Editora Media is a social media agency and influencer management agency servicing the beauty industry. Since starting Editora Media, we haven't done a day of marketing. Everything has been word of mouth. We have absolutely grown so much. We started with just me and my very, very good friend, Karen. Basically, I said to Karen, if you are on board with me, I will start this company. If you are with me, I will start this company. I had so much faith, and I have so much faith in Karen, one of her #1 cheerleaders. I trust her with everything. And so Karen came on as our director of marketing, and it was just her and I and my cousin at the time. And basically we grew this company into what it is today. And we have 10 clients, and then we also manage about 18 influencers in the beauty space. This company is absolutely just amazing. I have been able to, really head up events like the American Influencer Awards. I was one of the original OGs of the American Influencer Awards, and also Beauty Education Summit with my good friend Ashley, who you guys have all seen. She's my hairstylist, and Tommy. Tommy, we will absolutely do a slay with very soon. She's amazing and incredible. We really concentrate with that show on education, surrounding influencers. I have done a lot. I have been really busy, and I am an absolute workaholic, but I've created this world, this ecosystem that I live for every single day. Before this house, before everything, I was working out of my apartment, and I was working insane hours, and I was hustling, and I was tired. I knew that something big was gonna happen. For me, Editora Media is a place where I'm able to work with like-minded creatives to create top-notch content and quality content, and our passion absolutely translates in the work that we create together. We have grown so much. We have a studio space now where we shoot and have, larger productions. We're no longer working out of my house. We're no longer working out of my garage in my living room, and it's just been such a blessing to be able to witness and see. And so I am able to work on a lot of really huge projects that I don't get to talk about a lot and reflect on. And today has been awesome because I was able to reflect on my career and how I went from, being a little girl who had dreams to write, who was writing poetry when she was in 6th grade, who did get published when she was a freshman in high school. And that's where my career started, and that's where the hustle started and this passion started. And I think that there's just so much more that I want to absolutely share with you guys, and I think this is such a great place to start. I hope that you guys enjoy this video, and I am so thrilled to share with you guys the big secret of what I do for work. And what I do for work is truly my #1 baby, and it brings me so much joy. And when people say, oh my gosh, you work too much, or like, I feel bad, like you're working so much and you're overworking yourself. I don't feel bad for me. I am living my dream. This is my passion, and I wouldn't change it for a thing in the entire world. I think that God gave me this gift to do something way bigger than what we're talking about right now. I have always sensed this greatness, like this thing that's going to be happening through something that I'm a part of, and I just truly feel like it's coming up, and this is only the beginning of it. So thank you guys so much. You guys can follow Editora Media on social media. We do a ton of giveaways. We do a lot of really cool BTS. If you guys want to support, it is at Editora Media on Instagram. All right guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you guys all are encouraged that no matter where you guys come from, what point in life you're in, you can absolutely make your dreams happen. You just have to believe in yourself. I always believed in myself. I still do. I'm my #1 cheerleader to this day. Love you guys.